take of the week.
It's
Then on the other side, we're like, oh, ESPN sucks. But how is Fox Sports, right?
yeah.
They have all this talent there that recruited from ESPN, the good ones, Colin Cowherd, right? Michelle Beadle, all these other names you can shout out. Chris
Skip
Broussard,
Bayless.
Nick Wright, Skip Bayless. And then they also recruited this man, Jason McIntyre, which I know you're a big fan of. So why don't you take over the reins here?
Yeah, so Jason McIntyre has struggled throughout his career to find a home because he's not a host of a show, and he's not particularly being a good at being a host because he's struggling to get his podcast at the volume with the support of Colin Cowherd off the ground here. If you look at any of the comments, people have been clowning him, and then he's rotated on shows like First Things First, and then Joy Taylor leaves the herd. And the best thing about Joy Taylor and the co-host before her, I think it was Christine Leahy.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Christine Leahy is Colin Cowherd. I love him, but he has a little bit of this dork where he can get a little bit too self-indulgent. And then Joy Taylor, Christine Leahy, they would kind of bring that dork down on the show. But then you replace both of them with Jason McIntyre, who is a full geek. He's a full nerd, and he's a full dork where he's like, actually, I think that Dak Prescott is better than Cam Newton, and here are the stats to prove it. All the time, I'm like, actually, if Dak Prescott played with Kelvin Benjamin, Jonathan Stewart, fossilized Greg Olsen, and Ted Ginn Jr., who's a punt returner. I get he's a good pass receiver and he can still catch and play. And I think it was not Curtis Samuel, Devin Funchess.
Yeah.
If that was his cast in Carolina, please tell me that he's gonna make the playoffs with that team with Ron Rivera as his head coach. You are absolutely and utterly out of your mind. And if you think he's going to go 15-1 with all of those players on the same team without CeeDee Lamb, you are also, again, out of your mind.
The thing that he did is he looked at the passing numbers, which if you were comparing him to, I don't know, a 2000s quarterback, like you want to compare his numbers to Peyton Manning or Drew Bledsoe or Drew Brees or whoever it is, sure, maybe you want to make that comparison. But what is Cam Newton famous for? Him, Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, these other guys, they're known for their running. And what did he do that year that he forgot to mention? Oh, I don't know, ran for 800 yards. He had, 15 touchdowns on the ground?
Yeah.
He has the most rushing yards of any quarterback in NFL history. We forgot about that, which is weird. Let's look at Dak Prescott's rushing numbers compared to Cam Newton. Let's look at the talent around him. His number one receiver ever was that 1 year with Kelvin Benjamin. That 1 year. Notice when I mention certain players and I say that 1 year. 1 year wonder, Kelvin Benjamin. Jonathan Stewart, that 1 year. He had Christian McCaffrey, the end of his career, before he really came into Christian McCaffrey. Not only that, offensive line compared to the Cowboys, it's not even close. Receivers. His worst number one receiver, that being Dak Prescott, was maybe end of his career Des Bryant. Maybe. But then it was CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, two guys who will be Hall of Famers someday.
He still had Zeke in the best O-line in the league.
And not just Zeke. Prime Zeke. Zeke going into the Turkey Bowl, after a 4-touchdown performance.
Jumping into the Salvation Army bucket.
Exactly. Like, we're talking about prime Zeke Elliott. We're talking about, top running backs of the decade. He's on that list. Jonathan Stewart, where is he on that list? He's not even mentioned because it's, remember that 1 year with Jonathan Stewart? It's not even close.
Barely. It still felt like they were scraping and crawling for every single yard with Jonathan Stewart. It wasn't like he was this magical running back that was really good. It wasn't even like to the same level as one of DeMarco Murray's best year with Dallas, but like Cam Newton, his best receiver was Steve Smith, senior at the end of his career. And Steve Smith still had some juice in the tank. But the fact that he was able to bring that team to the playoffs, like the fact that you shouldn't even be comparing Cam Newton to Dak Prescott because Dak Prescott hasn't even gotten past the second round of the playoffs yet. And then also, he was defending this take all week, and he's been like on X, on Twitter. You have a really bad take when you see the guy trying to argue with people all week long. Like, and you can tell it's like bothering him that he thought he came to the office. He's like, wow, I have this really good take. And it's going to be that Dak Prescott's better than Cam Newton. And all these shows are going to be like, this guy is a genius. He took a dual threat quarterback and a passing quarterback, and he only compared their passing numbers when one of them had no help and the other one had a top 5 wide receiver, O-line, and running back in the league. Who would have thought? That's crazy. And then you also have him when he's arguing this take all week. He's like, well, I don't get why everyone's saying that Ted Ginn Jr. is just like a scrub. It's like, that's like saying, well, Jacoby Jones isn't like a great wide receiver, but he's like a good player to have on your team. It's like no one's saying that Ted Ginn Jr. or Jacoby Jones aren't really good wide receivers, but your punt returner, like, no, your punt returner is not going to be a number 1. And Ted Ginn Jr. is like a really good 4 to have on your team with 3 really good wide receivers.
So that's the thing. Ted Ginn was his number 1. Well, Dak Prescott, like, he had someone like a Cedric Wilson or Michael Gallup, right? Those were his 3 or 4s, right? And that included people like Jason Witten and Dalton Schultz in the mix as well. His number 1 receiver was Ted Ginn, which is like having his number 1 receiver be Jacoby Jones. 2 guys who are solid, but it's like, it's not quite to the level when you can also lean on Amari Cooper. You can lean on CeeDee Lamb. You can lean on Dez Bryant. You can lean on Zeke Elliott.
Brandon Cooks.
Well, now you can lean on Brandon Cooks. It's like, it's not quite the same when you have generational wide receivers. Guys that when you talk about best receivers of the decade, 2010s, you can mention Dez Bryant. You can mention Amari Cooper.
Are we mentioning Devin Funchess?
We're not mentioning Devin Funchess. Tell you what, guess who else we're not mentioning?
Yeah.
Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin is somebody that when you are just going down the line, you're playing in the immaculate grids, or maybe you're just at a bar and you're bored with your friends. You're like, oh, remember this guy?
Yeah.
Kelvin Benjamin's a name that comes up. Remember when he played for the Bills? Yeah. No. Surprising. That's surprising. It's always just that 1 year. Remember that 1 year?
He comes up in the Kelvin Benjamin only comes up when you're talking about Eddie Lacy.
Yeah.
It's that conversation. You're like, remember the guys who couldn't get in shape?
The story of Dak Prescott and the story of Cam Newton. The story of Cam Newton has been carrying the Carolina Panthers franchise from when he was drafted till about 2016, 2017, until TJ Watt ruined his career. And then the way they dismayed him. Dak Prescott has been, you know, really just being like the best game manager in the NFL, really, because that's what Cam Newton compared him to. That's what brought up the conversation, which was top game managers in the league. He said like Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. And that's where the whole fucking conversation came from, was calling him a game manager.
It's fair because Dak Prescott's not winning you any games.
And I think the game manager conversation can be taken aggressively, right? I think that if you're talking about like top game managers in the league, put Brock Purdy, put Dak Prescott in that conversation. Just because you're a game manager doesn't mean you're not a good quarterback.
Right.
But like, we can have, what's the eye test, right? You and I, 2020 vision. Right now it's 2024 because it's about to be a new year. But like, there's a difference between Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
And Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott. And it's obvious. Because look at what Patrick Mahomes is doing with less than stellar wide receivers. Although it's a down year, still Patrick Mahomes. Look what Lamar Jackson did when his number 2 was Willie Snead. And then look at what Dak Prescott is and what Brock Purdy are with all that talent.
Yeah.
It's not really close.
Yeah, even if you put Dak on the Ravens. Ugh.
Yeah.
But I would argue if you put Dak on that Carolina team, you're not making the playoffs.
They're probably 7-9.
You're probably 7-9 with that talent. I mean, Dak had Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb the same year and couldn't get it done.
Yep.
Like, at some point, you have to step up here, make a Super Bowl. Cam Newton was carrying that team on his back. The defense was really good. You had Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis Sr., Josh Norman at the time on that team. But at the same time, I've seen plenty of really good defenses not make the playoffs, especially with really bad weapons. And Cam Newton, he had Greg Olson, but it's like playing with Patriots wide receivers. It's playing like with the wide receivers of the Titans right now. Like if you put Dak on the Titans, is he bringing that team to the playoffs? Maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe they're like slightly. I think they're probably like 7, 7-10, 8-9. I think Dak Prescott is a good quarterback. You could say I think he's an above average quarterback, but saying that he's in the same conversation as Cam Newton, when we talk about top quarterbacks of the last decade, he had a period of time, like a 4-year stretch where he was just carrying that franchise. And look what they were before him and look where they were after him. They were second on the worst teams of the NFL this week. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, no wonder his completion percentage was so low. People are like, well, his completion percentage was 59 one year. It's like, yeah, when you're throwing to Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess, and Ted Ginn Jr., your completion percentage is probably going to be pretty low. And then even with that, he was still better than Dak and took his team to a Super Bowl.
And won an MVP.
Yeah, and it's like, can we write the story of football without Dak Prescott? We'll see how his career plays out. But yes, can we write it without Cam Newton? Absolutely not.
You can't talk about 2016 without him.
No.
I remember 2016 very well.
2015, yeah.
2015. Yeah. 2015, the year of Cam Newton, took over the sports world, took over pop culture. Yeah. He became the Russell Westbrook of the NFL.
Yeah.
And in a great way. And, you know, I kind of wish they did end up winning that Super Bowl, but either way, he cemented himself as an icon at that point.
And you went 15-1 in a division with Atlanta, who made the Super Bowl next year. And then also Drew Brees and Sean Payton in that division as well.
Exactly. And they ended up, you know, kind of falling off relatively quick, but it was because, I mean, look at the talent that was around him. And then also some injuries that piled up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what they were thinking. Usually it's Nick Wright that fills in, which Nick Wright, he grinds my gears with how he's like a Chiefs mega fan, so whatever. And then his LeBron like delusion about LeBron James. But like other than that, his takes are fairly sound and reasonable. Jason McIntyre's take was like, you forgot the most important part of the whole issue.
Exactly. You put the whole picture there, you put in the rushing yards as well. Those numbers are not close.
Yeah.
So this is why the Brickyard is the best that is on the internet, and why I'm confused why ESPN and Fox Sports has not given us a call, because we would demolish Mike Greenberg and Jason McIntyre and all these other bozos that we see throughout the interwebs each and every week.